interestingly, and now this year, yeah, I've seen a lot of people are facing having too much inventory. Everyone is facing this problem because of what's currently happened to Indonesia right now. There's few things. Of course, number one, since March the war started, everyone have this wait and see situation. And it's also interesting to see that since I started until now, the challenge are always similar. The way of planning is still relying on human being. They're still trying to use the conventional way to do it. The adoption to new things are still not there, and they end up having a lot of mismatched inventory. Mismatched inventory, wrong place, the wrong time, you have to waste it, you have to bring it back to the DC. And to me, when I always share to customers, it's all money. If you don't plan it well, then you have problem. Because you don't have the money to bring in the new products, then you have to get loan from the bank, you have to get interest. It's quite a painful journey if they don't do it well.
Okay, welcome to the Indo-European Bridge. Today I'm joined by Ryan Ching, Managing Director of Slimstock Indonesia. So Ryan, it is great to having you here on the Indo-European Bridge. Thank you for joining. And before we dive into all the details, so maybe could you share more details about you first, a short introduction. Who's actually Ryan?
Okay, thank you so much, Timo. I think it's also interesting that we have this session today after we've been knowing each other for around 3 years.
Yeah.
So it's also nice that I saw Timo started this Indo-European Bridge, because it's cool. Because there's a lot of companies outside that do not know how to start in Indonesia, right? But before we go into the details later on and we'll go into further discussion, maybe just a quick sharing of myself. So we met 3 years. We first met in one of the ISCA event where he was a speaker, I'm a speaker, and then that's where I started Indonesia office 3 years ago. I came from Singapore. When I came over here, it was scratch. I started with two team members, me and another person, get a co-working space, and then start to grow the team from there. A lot of things that we explored or we encountered where starting in a business in Indonesia is not as simple as it is. Things are not as clear as it is. And for me, I work in Slimstock. So the company that I started is Slimstock, where we focus about inventory optimization. So it's a very niche industry where we focus on demand planning, replenishment, inventory control, making sure the customers are putting the right capital investment in the right stock. That's where, especially after COVID, people start to realize it's not simple. The more capital investment stuck in stock or they have to clear it, obsolete it, it's actually very painful. That's where we come in.
Okay, thank you for sharing this insight for the short introduction, Ryan, itself. So, like you said, yeah, you started really from ground up, from zero here in Indonesia, and of course there were also some challenges. Yeah, there might be also some difference from Indonesia, and specifically when we look at the supply chain, gap between European models and what is needed in the Indonesian market. So why actually does it require also a different approach, Ryan?
If you compare a lot of European companies who came here, or at least even we compare the model in Asia and Indonesia. Indonesia itself is a different world by itself. Indonesia has 17,000 islands. It's a huge archipelago where the logistics gets very complicated. Where I come from, Singapore is one island by itself. It's not too complicated. You have one DC is enough to cover one journey from one side of the country to another side is 2 hours maximum. If you talk about Europe, it's not so much, it's a bit more centralized within a land, right? It's not too much of different islands where you have to consider all the different lead times, and all the different islands have potentially different seasonality, different holidays. It gets very complicated. That's why sometimes coming to Indonesia itself is not as simple as what we see in other countries. Yeah.
Okay. Let's maybe go also into the day-to-day, right? If you walk into a new client meeting here in Indonesia, what are the most common inventory pitfalls you see that companies are failing maybe to address?
Okay. Interestingly, and now this year, yeah, I've seen a lot of people are having too much inventory. everyone is facing this problem because of what's currently happened to Indonesia right now. There's few things. Of course, number one, since March the war started, everyone have this wait and see situation. And it's also interesting to see that since I started until now, the challenge are always similar. The way of planning is still relying on human being. They're still trying to use the conventional way to do it. The adoption to new things are still not there, and they end up having a lot of mismatched inventory. Mismatched inventory, wrong place, the wrong time, you have to waste it, you have to bring it back to the DC. And to me, when I always share to customers, it's all money. If you don't plan it well, then you have problem. Because you don't have the money to bring in the new products, then you have to get loan from the bank, you have to get interest. It's quite a painful journey if they don't do it well.
Okay. As you were mentioning, they do it still in a or it's managed by humans, yeah, in a how to say, more manual or traditional way. What does it actually mean if you manage that if it's managed by humans? Yeah, is it like you have your Excel sheets? This is how companies manage actually it, or how can we imagine that?
Most of the customers I met, yes, for sure, they're still using Excel sheet. The Excel sheet has been created maybe 10 or 20 years ago, and they're still using the same way. And to me, it's very dangerous because I've seen cases where people just don't understand. They just look at the Excel sheet, this is what it says. Full stop, without properly understanding what's going on behind the numbers. Because to me, supply chain is all about numbers. If you put it the right parameters and with the right information, you get the right result. But not knowing what it says and just following blindly is actually very dangerous. And even in Excel sheet, I've seen people make mistake where instead of filling up the numbers, they copy or they drag the formula downwards. The whole thing got crushed because now they have so much excess stock that it becomes hard for them to handle. And for me, that's why it's important. I see the need that I can help. If I can help them to save all this extra inventory, there's a value in the customer to trust us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to any urgency or supply chain disruptions. Yeah. So I could imagine if everything is managed by Excel, so it doesn't give you the flexibility. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like you also shared, there might be sometimes then mismatch. Yeah. And in these situations, I think it would be very interesting to the audience as well, how Slimstock Indonesia can help here, to manage the inventory in a better way, right?
Yeah, that's also interesting because if you see Excel, Excel is I would say it's not manual as per se. It's still a bit semi-auto, right? It's still managed by human. The calculation can be automated, but there's also a limit to Excel. The moment you hit more than, let's say, 10,000 article lines above, it starts to slow down. Imagine in Indonesia, you have so many different locations, you have so many warehouses, you have so many stores. It becomes complicated because now you're potentially managing like 100,000 or 1 million inventory or articles. Your Excel won't help you anymore. And in Excel, if you start to realize, you only get the latest update as you change a field. But in supply chain, all the fields are changing at the same time. So it's not as dynamic as what people would think. Because humans, we have certain capacity of what we can remember. That's why sometimes for us, even our phones, our laptops, is to support, to make our life easy so that we spend the time on the right things. So that's where for me, in Slim4 inventory optimization is good because we take away the hassle of remembering all these things. And what you want the software or the application to help you is to direct you to where you should place your biggest attention. That's to me, that's the best thing that I would say in any application implementation.
Okay. And then also to prevent or to help when you have these dynamics in supply chain as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay. The last 2 years have been a so-called roller coaster, right? Also for logistics. So how have these global and local shifts forced the Indonesian business to fundamentally change the demand planning mindset, right? So there would be the question, is there something you feel there is a change that people are feeling, okay, now we talk about Excel, handling everything in a manual way, but that people are trying to change their mindset, you know, how actually inventory or supply chain should be changed.
Yeah. In terms of attempt, for sure. I think in Indonesia, everyone is trying to improve. Or sometimes that speed of improvement is not catching up as what it is, because I think in Indonesia things are much slower. The decision making is much slower. The courage to try new things, sometimes it's a bit slower, right? Yes, we talk about global logistics change, local logistics change. Globally itself, we know that because of the oil war, it becomes hard. I've seen, let's say example, some cases, some people declared force majeure. Plastics prices increase 80%. So what would people do? They have to change. They have to look at alternative. Because of certain logistics, the fuel is not coming. Your fuel increases, your product commodity increases, everything increases. Even the food price, sometimes I'm shocked. Now the food price in Indonesia is increasing so much. So it becomes a trigger for people to learn that, yeah, it's you can't really just pretend that everything is like how it used to be. In a lot of companies, sometimes why when I do some sharing session is for them to learn to prevent or at least have a plan B. So in some cases, it's more of resilience. How would you make your company, or at least the way you will operate, is more resilient than just go by ideal case. If everything is standard, it's easy, right? But things in life is never standard. I was just joking with one of my friends recently. We just had COVID 3 years ago. What's going on? Every single year we have new things. The war this year, the currency is dropping so bad in Indonesia this year. All the business, I tell them, so if you still don't learn the lesson from the last time, then we are not learning, because you see every single year we have something, right? That's where global logistics, locally wise, is different. If you look at Indonesia local logistics, it's actually very determined by the infrastructure. Infrastructure in Indonesia is not growing as fast as what it's supposed to be. So, like some cases, I see rural areas, you don't have a good road, you don't have a good internet connectivity. In rural areas, sometimes it's hard to implement any applications. If you want to train your logistics or get the best routing, you don't have Google Map over there. How do you plan? So it becomes tricky for a lot of companies to try to adopt, because even if they want to adopt, sometimes they still cannot because of the limitation. That's what I see currently happening right now.
Okay, so we can say here that it's actually clear, right? Firefighting isn't a long-term strategy. It's not definitely helping you. Maybe always short-term. You can find their way. And you were also talking about a so-called plan B. And I think it is very important then to move from the so-called reactive to being proactive. So let's also talk a bit about the tech stack itself. There is so much hype ongoing at the moment when we talk about AI and automation right now. So in the context of Indonesian enterprises, how is it actually changing the game on the floor?
I noticed this, especially this year, because since AI has been started, let's say they started with ChatGPT, and then we have Claude, we have OpenAI, we have so many different things. Everyone is always trying to find what they can automate. The simple stuff, actually even coding itself, AI can do much better. I've seen a lot of people who struggle, but for things that is structured, AI can do wonders, right? That you don't need to think. That's why even sometimes with email, we can ask AI to help us to draft. Communication wise, we can ask AI to help. Like even video editing, all this content creation, we can ask AI. That's where AI is a lot of times is based on specific set of rules. If your rules are clear, it's simple, right? I've seen cases where in customers, they always ask me, oh yeah, what kind of things we can consider AI in terms of supply chain? Yes, of course, we can use AI in demand forecasting. We can learn as every single day, because the more information you have in the market, okay, it will relearn like itself. It will recommend the right different model because the trends are different. Customer behavior are different. The market taste has changed. So you want that insights. But of course, AI is not perfect. Humans, they have to do a final adjustment. Yes, this still makes sense to it, because sometimes I think a lot of people may misunderstand. They think AI will be perfect. Even ChatGPT itself, sometimes you realize they give you some nonsense stuff that you have to check. Right? That's where I wouldn't say, I always encourage people to just make sure you double check, because you don't want, the software is there to help you, but the final outcome is still human, you still have to see it.
Yeah, for the so-called final check then, yeah. So it's maybe more a combination between making use of the technology that is available, can help you in a certain way, but you still need to have the humans behind.
Yeah.
Here, a follow-up question to you as well, Ryan. So how is then actually Slimstock linked to AI itself?
We do have a few elements of AI in our software. So of course, one is the demand forecasting. How can we use the AI to actually improve the demand forecasting? Because sometimes most of my customers will have problems where when they use Excel or they use a conventional method to do a demand forecasting, they suffered because the market has changed. If they use Excel or they use the old way, they always look at history. History and last year and this year is different. There's no war last year. There's no drop in Indonesian currency last year. Right? Last year was actually a more peaceful year than this year. The previous year, 2022-23, was COVID. They can't compare. So that's where sometimes they need to learn that there's benefits in certain ways, right? By using software or AI machine learning to learn. That's one. I also realized that in Indonesia, or at least in the FMCG world, promotion is huge. Yeah, you always use promotion to clear off additional inventory. You use promotion to drive demand. Especially now in the market, they are always trying to create demand, not following. They create new products just to drive the demand, get influencers to drive the demand, and that's how you create the market. A promotional, sometimes you can use AI to learn it, because they will recommend to you based on all your different attributes. They can recommend the right uplift factor. That means how much you should prepare for your promotions if you do it in future. That's where a lot of people don't understand. They miss it because they use, last year I just do a 50% uplift, this year I'm going to do the same. But you might have missed out all your sales last year because you didn't prepare enough. So by right, you should have 200% maybe. Yeah. So those elements of AI. And the next thing I think in Slimstock, I realized we're also using something like a AskRoth. It's a chat GPT version in Slimfall, where you can also ask, what's my top 3 customers? What should I focus? What's the ABC setting that I'm using? What's my top 3 priority items that I should focus? If you have the right database, you have the right information, you can get the good insights, because all this information triggers your next strategy. Right? This year, yeah, maybe in Indonesia, not every single business is doing well. But what's next? So sometimes a lot of companies have to focus on what's next rather than just sitting on the current situation. Right? That's where I think the AI can help.
Okay. Thank you for sharing all these valuable insights and good points. Yeah, really good points, Ryan. You were sharing here, especially in terms of the mismatch. Yeah, if you do your supply chain planning in a manual way. And we might also talk about the factor of binded capital itself. Yeah. So if you do your planning based on last year's numbers, so you might have too many products in your warehouse, and that's binded capital. Yeah. And especially maybe if you are in let's say in food and beverage in that market itself. Yeah. Let's say as a manufacturer. So some of the products from last year. Yeah. There might be maybe no market anymore for this year, But then you have all your products then in your warehouse as well,
Yes.
And this can be sometimes a loss.
Yeah, it is a huge one. Especially if you talk about FMCG, they have shelf life. You don't plan well, you have to throw it away, and throw it away is also additional cost, because it's not something you can just throw in the river and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. In your professional experience, when a digital transformation project stalls here, is it because the technology wasn't up to the task, or is it a barrier of human mindset and legacy processes?
For that question, actually, I wouldn't say it's one or the other. Actually, it's a combination of all three. On one side, yes, it's always people, process, and system. Right? You can have the best people. I've seen examples where the people will learn, they adapt. Because over there, or at least in some of the projects, the people are curious, they are learning, they are trying to adopt new software. Knowledge learning is also one of the hardest thing. Because when you go into a learning stage, you are being challenged to something that you're not used to it. What I've seen in a lot of people is when you're comfortable, it's easy. When you're forced to do something different, it's tough and you get stressed because this is not that what you want, not what you like, but you have no choice but to learn. People can evolve through the learning process. They are the next value generation workers. People who don't want to evolve and want to do the same way, that's the hard part. Because the companies have to think, how would the person bring the company to the next level where everyone is evolving, right? Of course, system and process is not out of the picture. You can have the best person, you can have the best system, but your process is not there. How would they adapt, right? I've seen cases where it happens. Process are not clear, right? Even returns are not being written inside. Like to me, it's like it doesn't make sense. Even a return from a customer have to be triggered into your system. You cannot just write off. You cannot just change your invoice or delivery, because then who's checking all this? So sometimes as a consultant or when I embark into projects like that, I will also be upfront and honest. Because if I see something like that, to me, it's risky. If I don't help the customer or I don't bring it up, then it's my mistake. But at least if I bring it up, the boss is aware of it, then they can think about it, how to deal with it. If they decide not to change, by all means, right? At least we've done our part as a consultants. And of course, system. I've seen so many implementation. I previously was working in an ERP company, WMS, TMS company myself. I've seen where people just implement system for the sake of implement system. This is how the software works. By all means, learn how to use it. But for me personally itself, when I've encountered so many projects, it's always very important to mix or at least to assimilate the system into the process. A lot of times projects fails because the system is by itself, right? You don't or the implementation party don't think about how to build it with the process that is there, right? A lot of times people are just implementing it for the sake of implementing it. Whether they go live or not, whether the customer can use it or not, they don't understand. Because that's also what I realized. For me, I'm lucky because I came from a logistics background. I worked in 3PL before. I was one of the users, right? When I implementing system, my only advice is always put ourselves in their shoes. Can they use it? If you can answer that yes, then it's good. But if you cannot, and if even you think for 2 seconds or 5 seconds that I think cannot, means we are not doing a good job yet. So as the implementation party itself, sometimes we also must put ourselves as a consultant. What is the best way to apply this software or this module so that the customer get the benefits? Otherwise, 1 year, 2 years down the road, they'll complain because they cannot use, they go back to Excel.
Yeah. And this is definitely a big advantage. You were previously on the other side.
Yeah.
That's why you can put your how to say you can understand the other perspective, which is helping you definitely a lot. And it's also fascinating. It's a fascinating conflict between innovation and tradition. But beyond just getting the job done, there's a bigger picture, sustainability itself. So how does actually inventory optimization directly support a so-called circular economy, which is in these days a very big topic?
Yeah. If you look at the whole itself, yes, circular economy, the return logistics, all these are important, right? A lot of companies started to look into it this year. They start to include the element in their tender process. They start to ask about, if your office is it green? They start to ask you about, how much flights are you taking? Because all these are carbon footprint, right? So to me, inventory optimization plays a very important role is because number one, we are optimizing how much inventory you should have. So what happens when you have too much excess stock? It means you have produced too much. You can also imagine how much the manufacturing has already emitted in terms of carbon footprint. If you see a lot of companies where, let's say automotive, sometimes they do a lot of freight, air freight. Air freight, just for one small little item is expensive because it's carbon footprint. The more rush order costs or rush order things that they're doing, it means there's a lot more carbon footprint that's involved. So to me, if you can optimize the planning in such a way that it becomes predictable, then you're also reducing how much carbon footprint you're introducing in terms of transportation. if I can help them to optimize the inventory they should have in every single location, we're also helping them to also reduce the excess stock that they're producing. Because I've seen that happening there. Customers are focusing now, especially in Indonesia, they're focusing about how to produce, how to make sure I produce efficiently, but they haven't talked about actually my finished goods planning is still not good.
Okay. So looking also at the roadmap for 2027, yeah, how do you see the landscape of industrial manufacturing evolving in Indonesia? And so that would be the follow-up question here.
Yeah, if Indonesia right now, Indonesia is a huge manufacturing country, right? And I've seen that a lot of people are starting to focus on digitization. Yeah, of course, when it started Indonesia so far, a lot of manufacturing are still relying on the cheap labor. They moved to a different region where the labors are cheaper, but of course, at a certain point, they have to consider automating. Automation for manufacturing is still not too front forward yet, based on what I see. A lot of them are still considering ERP. Everyone should have by now. 2-3 years ago, or maybe 2018 when I came here, ERP is still not too existent in a lot of companies. But now the basic ERP is there. A lot of companies are starting to look at WMS system, because they're still using a pen and paper, the book, and maybe just a conventional someone's memory. So people are starting to evolve how to make it more efficient in the warehouse. And I also see more companies starting to focus on MES solution, because MES is good when they start to connect the dots on the shop floor, right? With the right information and this feedback to the ERP system, they get the latest update of what's happening. For me, I also started to have more conversation with manufacturing companies, because now they don't only think about this, they're also thinking about the next step. Because once they can automate the inventory planning, right, the manufacturing gets the best benefit. Because in the manufacturing world, the hardest impacted one is always the upstream. If my finished goods planning is bad, the manufacturing is always getting the last bit of the whack, right? And most of here, if you see in Indonesia, or at least maybe in other countries as well, manufacturing is always firefighting because of the changes. The retail, the sales is changing in the front, the back have to follow, because in a lot of companies, they always focus, this is where the revenue comes from. Manufacturing is just supporting. But we kind of forgot, that's the backbone also, right? It's not just the sales change next month's forecast. Now we have to change our manufacturing planning, because otherwise we lose the sales. But that's where it's an example of where if you don't have the right process, everyone is a bit more chaotic. We focus on getting the revenue, but the back end is always getting the whiplash out of it.
Yeah. Good points. Yeah. So it would be more like you need to have this end-to-end visibility to really see what is happening. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And there could be also a reason now that we talk already about AI. Yeah. Which is a game changer. Yeah. In a certain way. This might be also the reason why some companies might think now in a different way to say, we have now AI. So yes, MES is maybe a topic, but why should I go for an out-of-the-box solution? Yeah, for instance,
Yep.
AI might be maybe cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting because sometimes I had this similar conversation to understand why sometimes people are afraid to try out of the box, right? For let's say example, I use my company as example. Slimstock itself is not new. It's been there for 33 years. Yeah, 2000. Yeah, 33 years now. So it's still fairly new in Indonesia, and a lot of people are afraid. Why would I want to try something new? Yet, if I just use existing system, I don't do anything, I'm fine. It's not my problem anymore. Sometimes it's also trying out of the box will let them get new results that they never expect. But it takes a first step, right? That's where for me sometimes I'm also happy and thankful that the customers trusted me and they took the first step, and it's important for us to show the result, otherwise I'll have headache later on. So yeah, That's what I see. Sometimes people are more, they're afraid. They don't dare to commit to the boss because once you ask for a big commitment, huge investment, the boss will use this as a leverage. You ask for this, I'm gonna hold this to you.
Yeah, okay, good point as well here. So we have covered tech and the vision already. Now let's wrap up with some hard-earned wisdom for the leaders in our audience. If a European firm is looking to expand into Indonesia, what is the supply chain reality they must be prepared for?
If a European companies want to go to Indonesia, I would say usually we need to start local. Right? Start local means we need to understand a bit of the local culture, the local logistics, the local infrastructure, and then also a little bit of expectation management. So what I can share is more of sometimes things that work in Europe may not work in Indonesia. Things that may work in Indonesia may not work in Europe because it's two different countries, two different way of work. So for me personally itself, when I came from Singapore, I'm lucky because I have a best, it's closer, right, to Indonesia itself. And for me to be able to adjust it is easier. So I've seen cases where if we can't evolve our way of work, we can't evolve our mindset, we're going to be left behind in Indonesia market. Yeah, that's what I can share to people who wants to come to Indonesia.
And it might be also something to say, Ryan. Yeah. So, like you said, you need to localize, right, in a certain way here in Indonesia, and things might also take more time. To say, like, as a European company, so I might have my strategy. Yeah. And but endurance is very important here as well to succeed. Yeah. And have then to build up the network.
But if possible, I think it's also nice that Timo is starting this because I realize for a lot of overseas companies, getting the right people is always hard. And especially if you're venturing into new country, you need to make sure that there's no mistake. It's not like you are gambling. You trust a person, we need to make sure the person is with you. So that's why it's also good that if Timo, people who want to come here, of course, you can engage with your expertise to help them to bridge, which is nice.
Yeah, sure. Beyond the boardroom, what is the one piece of advice you live by that helps you maintain clarity and performance in a high-pressure leadership role?
For this, there's two things I learned when I'm in Indonesia. First, network. In a lot of cases where we are faced with a tough situation in the market, the people around us can give us insights that we've never experienced. Because sometimes it's harder for you to learn through every single experience yourself. That's the long journey. But in Indonesia, it's good because the people here are willing to connect. They're willing to help. I've also encountered where I ask advice from mentors. For me, I always try to get mentors from the people around me. I always ask for help, ask for advice, and a lot of times I get good insights, and it helps you to regain the clear mind, right, to be able to make the right steps. Because sometimes if you're only seeing things from one angle, we only make decision based on that angle. But if we explore or we talk to some people, business owners who have done so many different things, potentially they have experienced even more than us. That's where I like, because here people don't mind sharing their knowledge. And then of course, with all the information that you get from a lot of different people, I think it's also our role to also think clearly, right? A lot of times in our role, especially in the business leaders, our job is to make critical decision, right? Our role is not to just do operations day and day. Yeah, we were there once, but we have also evolved to a point where our value comes in making the tough choices, the next direction. That's where we need to learn how to filter all those noises. Making decisions, sometimes we are being introduced with so many inputs. Some people may struggle to even do the next step. But it's also important that we need to make the next step knowing that this is the best choice at this point of time. Move forward.
Yeah. Okay. And it's not only about high performance in leadership as well, but high performance also for your team here in Indonesia as well. So how can you ensure to maintain that kind of high performance for your team here?
Okay. High performance team is, I think, what everyone wants, right? But it's also for me, since when I started here, one thing I realized, human capital is important. People are important. Culture are important. You can't have high performance if your culture is not there, right? If it's a toxic culture, then it's no longer high performance. You can high performance, bad culture, your business will close down. People, to me, is also about knowledge. If I have my team member or my teammates are doing the same thing over and over again for the 3 years and not improving, that's not high performance to me. So to me, I would focus on training them, giving them opportunities to learn. Even for me, the consultants, I'll send them for classes, go for certifications, because in future, if you need to implement more projects that is more complicated, you need to also be able to see bigger things, not just doing as what it is. So that's also sometimes in a high performance team, we tend to push them to go beyond their boundary. Right? Consultants, you have to learn how to be a speaker. You have to go into the retail outlets to understand what is the footwork, what's the path, what's the planogram, how you see what's the feel of the stores. Because if you see, let's say in retail itself, you have so many different types of store, fashion store, electronic store, you can have hard discount store. Every single thing have different way of going. So to me, it's not just doing as it is. High performance team are people who are driven, curious, and they'll do it to the next level.
Okay, and teamwork to create this teamwork, right? Through the team spirit and appreciation might be important as well. In some countries, Ryan, yeah, it is like a 8 to 5 job, and afterwards, so your responsibilities might end. But are there any differences in Indonesia in terms of still maintaining the relationship itself, having some food with your team here in Indonesia, do some trips during the weekend? How can we imagine that as well? This could be something interesting for the audience.
Okay, maybe this is a mini marketing for the Slimstock team then. We do tend to have once a month company gathering. So occasionally, right now, I think my team is planning to do Spider-Man movie screening. So to me, it's nice. Work is work. Once we finish work, we try to be able to enjoy each other's company. Because sometimes for people to get the best teamwork, they need to have collaboration. They need to be able to work together. The moment you don't know a person, you can't get teamwork because you haven't really worked before, right? And that's where when we put people in different things, projects together, they get the best collaboration. They can work well together. They know it's like dancing, right? The person is moving one step forward, I'm moving one step backward. That's how I see it. And of course, over here in Indonesia, we tend to bring them to a company trip once a year. Because to me, twice a year actually. One is annual summit, one is Indonesia local trip. Last year I brought them to Labuan Bajo. And of course, it's a team-based, teamwork kind of activity, right? You go there, 3 days, 2 nights, you stay in the same villa, resort together, give you some team bonding activities where you have to do it together. Sometimes it's doing it together will bring people together, right? That's where I see so important, especially in Indonesia when I'm growing, or at least the team is growing, you need the team to be united. Regardless of what the external influence is or what's going on in the logistics world, as long as our team is united, we can grow well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this, Ryan. Yeah, and great to hear how you take care of your team. Yeah, the measurements in terms of team building and everything. So it was a great pleasure to having you on the Indo-European Bridge. Where can actually the listeners connect with you and Slimstock Indonesia to learn more?
Of course, thank you so much, Timo, for inviting me. It's also nice to share my experience. Connect to us. You can actually reach us, find us in slimstock.com. That's our website. Otherwise, you can actually pop by. If you want to pop by our office, we are at International Financial Center. Or you can just drop us an email, right? Or just drop us a message. I think it's easy. To us, we are a lot focused on sharing knowledge, right? I think in Indonesia, that's where we realize the more we share knowledge from our own experience, I think the more people will benefit. That's where we can add value to people.
Perfect. And of course, we will also share then later on in the show notes, the contact details from Slimstock Indonesia as well. Thank you so much for listening, and see you in the next episode.
Thank you, Tino.
Thank you.